The Christmas season is over so fast. We take all this time to get ready for it in Advent. And then it comes, and it's over so soon. It's the shortest of the seasons of the church year. Already yesterday was Epiphany, and this is Epiphany Sunday. And so Christmas has already left us, but there's a reason for that. You know, we gathered here on Christmas Eve, and it was so beautiful, wasn't it? You musicians and all who blessed us, all this beautiful music. Congregation was full of people. It was just a marvelous time. And we lighted the Christmas candle. And my favorite part of Christmas Eve is when the lights go down and we light each other's candles. We give the light to each other, and the light fills the sanctuary, and it's so beautiful. It's beautiful to stand here and just to look out and see you, and holding those candles and singing Silent Night, and the whole room just full of love, full of Christ, full of mystery and wonder, and all of the gifts of God. It seems like they just all come together in that one moment, and I just want it to last. I want that love and that feeling, and we're all together, and we're all just being blessed together by God's Spirit, God's presence and goodness. But it's not supposed to last that way very long. Because yesterday, Epiphany came, and this is the first Sunday after Epiphany, or Epiphany Sunday, if you want to call that. And we've already moved into this new time. The light that was given to us, that beautiful light that comes at Christmas, is not meant to stay in this place. It is meant to go out, break out, move out into all the world, so that all the earth, all persons, everywhere can be touched and reached and blessed by this light that is so beautiful, so wonderful for us. It's meant to go out. And so I had several texts that I could have preached on today. I could have preached on the coming of the Magi. Epiphany is the Magi story. They're not Jews. These three strangers that came from the east, they're Gentiles, you see. And so this Christ who is born for the world is not just for one nation, for one people, for one language, for one location. He's meant for all, for everyone. I could have preached a sermon on that. Or it's also the Sunday of the baptism of Jesus. This is the Sunday for that, in which we look at how Jesus, as a young man, gave himself into the waters of baptism by the hands of John the Baptizer. And when he came out of the water, the Holy Spirit filled his life. And we know what happened then. Jesus goes out into all the world, so to speak. He breaks every barrier of class and race and language and gender. His love and His Word and His new life is not just for some, not just for the good, not just for those who are religiously successful. It's for the sinner. It's for the broken. It's for the Gentile. It's for everybody. Could have preached on that text. The other text is the one we read today. It's the story of the call of the disciples. It's a wonderful story, isn't it? Jesus is walking along. I guess he was at the lake. He must have seen a couple fishermen. And they see him. And John says, "That's the one." And they begin to follow Jesus. And they discover this special gift for the world. And then it says that one of those disciples, whose name was Andrew, immediately, without hesitation, without waiting a moment, goes to his brother Simon. We know him also as Peter. He finds him and tells him. And then Jesus, a little bit later, finds Philip. "Follow me." And after he heard that word, Philip immediately goes to Nathanael and tells him what he has found. Are you getting this? Are you hearing what's happening here? The movement of this life, so special and wonderful for the world. Jesus finds Andrew, finds Philip finds, and this good news, this gift for the world, begins to move out. It can't be stopped. It wants to grow from one person to another. People keep finding their friends and their brothers and keep sharing the light. The light is not meant to stay with us. The light is meant to go, to grow, to glow, to fill the earth, and one after another begins to experience and know the light and receive the light for themselves. One of my favorite stories of someone finding the light is the story of the conversion of Chuck Colson, Charles Colson. Now, maybe you're not old enough to remember Watergate. I don't know if you're... He went to jail. He was one of the ones who went to prison. He was on the rise. He was, outstanding young man of Boston. He was a Marine. He was everything. Graduate of an Ivy League school. He was on his way, and he became an assistant to the President of the United States. Wow. There was a problem in his life. And that problem was that he only believed in raw power. That's how he did politics. Take no prisoners. He was the hatchet man for the President of the United States. But Watergate began to close in. He was one of the architects of that. Watergate began to close in on him, and one night, in real darkness and desperation, not knowing what else to do, he paid a visit to a friend of his by the name of Tom Phillips. Tom Phillips was president of a Fortune 500 company, very successful man. And they sat there on the patio that evening drinking iced tea, and Chuck Colson, this outstanding young man, this assistant to the President of the United States, was about ready to break. And Tom Phillips did something that was just so natural for him. He told about his faith, because he knew what Chuck Colson needed. He needed that light. So he told him about his faith. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to do that at some time in your life. We're all authorities. You're an authority on your own life, and your own faith, and how Christ, the light, came to you. And so Tom Phillips told Chuck, he was in New York City one night, and he happened to go to a Billy Graham crusade, and he heard his life laid out for him right there in the middle of the sermon that Billy Graham preached. And he went forward that night. And he said, after the service was over, he walked through New York City, and it was like carnival. It was like the most amazing night of his life. He had found the light. And then he looked at Chuck Colson and he said, Chuck, you're a person without the light. He told him point blank, power, what that does, pride, what that does to a person. He told him. And he invited him. He said, Chuck, would you like to give your life? Would you like to surrender your life to the light like I did in New York City when Billy Graham preached? Chuck Colson said, no, I don't think so. He had never gone to church in his life. He didn't know anything about faith. But he knew he needed something. Well, the evening was over, and Tom Phillips gave him a book to read, a C.S. Lewis book, and gave him his blessing, said a prayer for him, sent him on his way. Chuck Colson got in his car. He started it up. He turned off the key. He realized at that moment he needed something. That his life wasn't going to ever be right. That his life was broken. That he had followed the way of the world of raw power. He was prideful, full of himself. And he had brought catastrophe on his own life and the life of others. Turned off the engine, he got out of the car, and he started up to the house. And as he almost got to the door, he saw the lights go out. He didn't want to disturb them then. So he went back to his car. He got in the car, he started it up. This is all in the book, by the way, Born Again, if you ever want to read it. I didn't want to read the book. I didn't think much of Chuck Colson. I didn't think I would like the book. But I was, that's another sermon. I won't preach that one today. I was between jobs. I had accepted a job and left a job, and then I didn't have a job because I declined the job that I accepted, and I was in the basement. My family and I were living in the basement of a friend. I had no work. I had 2 little girls. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was where Chuck Colson was. I was broken. And the book, Born Again, was sitting on the table in the basement there of our friend's house, and I didn't have anything else to do. I picked it up and started reading it. Chuck Colson started up his car, and as he was going down the road, it just all broke. The tears began to fall. He said it was like swimming underwater. Couldn't see where he was going. He pulled his car off the road. He turned off the key. He said, for the first time in my life, I prayed. That wasn't really Tom Phillips. That was Andrew going to his brother Simon. Just telling about his faith and the light and the purpose and the love and the joy that was in his life because Christ, the light of the world, was in him, living, burning, alive. I met Chuck Colson in Washington, D.C. one time. He didn't just start and quit. He started a prison ministry, and the rest of his life until his death was a light, a candle shining in prisons all across the United States where people were coming to Christ in prison, finding new life and new beginning in prison because Tom shared his faith with Chuck. That's a great story. one of my other favorite stories of finding the light. It's a 19th century story, but I'm going to bring it back up to the present at the end. There was a young man in England who, on a snowy morning, set out to go to church, and he was different from Chuck Colson in this sense. He had grown up in the church. His parents were Christians. But that doesn't make you a Christian, does it? I mean, you can be born in a garage, but that you're not a Ford, you know. He was living in a Christian home, but he wasn't really a person in which the light was alive in his life. But anyway, he was on his way to church. His name was C.H. Spurgeon, this young man. And probably not a name that you know or you don't need to know, really. But he couldn't get to his church that morning because it was snowing so hard he couldn't get there. And so he stopped along the way at a primitive Methodist church. Now, I don't know if you know what that means or not, but the primitive Methodists sang too loudly. And they shouted and they went on. They were so uncouth that the Church of England would not even let those people join the Anglican Church in England. That's how uncouth they were. Well, this little primitive Methodist church had about 15 or 20 people there that snowy morning, and the minister couldn't even get to the church. And so C.H. Spurgeon, this young man, he was sitting there. And a cobbler, a shoemaker, not a preacher, a cobbler, got up to give the sermon. Spurgeon said that when he read the Bible, read the text, he couldn't even pronounce the words right. Uneducated, uncouth, primitive Methodist, you know. And he took for his text that morning a word from Isaiah 45, where the prophet says, "Look unto me and be saved, all the ends of the earth." Beautiful text. Spurgeon said that he preached himself out in 10 minutes. He did a 10-minute sermon and he kept saying, "Look unto me." And he told the congregation, don't look to yourself. You'll never be able to save yourself. That will always be a disappointment. Don't look at anything else. Look unto me and be saved, says the Lord. Look unto me. And then he looked right at C.H. Spurgeon. He said, "Young man, you look miserable. And you're going to be miserable until you follow this text. Look unto me." Spurgeon said, at that moment, he said, it was as if the darkness rolled away. Isn't that beautiful? The darkness rolled away. That's what happens when the light comes into a person's life. C.H. Spurgeon became a preacher. London Tabernacle they kept expanding the seating capacity. 6,000 people on Sunday morning came to hear him preach. And 6,000 people came on Sunday night to hear him preach. His books are still in print. His religious books, his sermons from the 19th century are still in print in the 21st century. And you're supposed to say, "I don't believe that." Well, I hardly believe it either. That's incredulous. You know what the word incredulous means? If I use big words, I get paid more. Incredulous. It means skeptical almost to unbelief. He's still being read. Mark Twain went to England one time and sat one Sunday morning and heard C.H. Spurgeon preach. And Mark Twain was not a pious person. You know that, right? He was not a church-going person, but he wrote to his wife and he said, of Spurgeon's preaching, he said, he was good. He was really good. A sidebar to that. I went to a conference at Princeton Seminary one time. It was a rush job. And the reason I went was because my mentor, Helmut Thielicke, a German theologian and pastor, the person who helped me know what to do, how to preach, how to think when I was a young pastor. And I didn't know anything. You get out of seminary and everything you know, you tell it in 2 weeks. I mean, that's how long it lasts. And then you got to keep reading. You got to keep growing. You got to keep developing. And C.H. Spurgeon, this German theologian, became my mentor. He showed me, he taught me, he guided me. His writings were the guiding force of my ministry for several years. And so when I heard that he was making a quick trip to America, and it was kind of a rush job, and only 20 people showed up, and I got in my car and I drove eight hours so I could be with Helmut Thielicke just for 2 or 3 days. He was every bit as wonderful as I thought he would be. And as we were talking, he told me through his translator, he said, sell everything you have and buy Spurgeon. You see how that's coming around? This slide, how it kind of, it goes across the centuries. It jumps from nation and language and people. It spreads in these amazing ways. And here I am telling you on a snowy Sunday morning here in Economy, Pennsylvania, about a cobbler who can't even pronounce the words, can't read the Bible, who gets up and preaches a 10-minute sermon, and the light goes into C.H. Spurgeon, and his writings are still all across the world, and my mentor tells me, read Spurgeon, sell everything you have, and read him. You see how it works? This light, it just jumps and goes and grows from person to person, from page to page. The light that we were given so wonderfully, so beautifully at Christmas doesn't want to stay here, but wants to go and grow and spread. I think I would be willing to wager that when you come to the table this morning, that you might be praying for someone who needs the light. I imagine you might be doing that. That your prayers will be for someone that you love, someone that you know, who needs the light. I also think that maybe when you come to the table, you might say to God, God, I've got the light to share with somebody. Help me to be an Andrew who went to his brother. Help me to be a Philip that went to Nathaniel. Help me to take the light, this little light of mine. Help me to make it shine somewhere. Amen.